right, and now we can get started. So welcome everybody to our last day of officer training. We are here today with Diana Strelchek, who works in the Office of Continuing Studies. Every year during officer training, we always love to have guests from other offices come in and present. And Diana is a certified ropes course facilitator. One of the many other hats that she wears. And so she was able to adapt the session that she typically runs for our in-person officer training on team building activities and ways to kind of make sure that you have a really strong team to start your fall semester. And she was able to adapt that to activities that you can run with your organization on Zoom. So I am going to pass the mic, or I don't know what we call it these days. I'm going to pass things over to Diana to get started.
Thanks, Lauren. So yeah, as Lauren said, my name is Diana Strelchek. I'm here with the Office of Continuing Studies. I'm coming to you from Rothenburg in Atlantic City. If you haven't come over to Stockton AC, I encourage you to do so. We have a lot of fun over here. And of course, we have the beach. So never a bad time. What I have formally done with our programs in the past, with what I've done with leadership training in the officer training, has been to help break physical barriers and help break down social barriers and create physical contact, appropriate and team building physical contact with you and your team members. That doesn't work anymore, at least not in COVID life. And so what I have done is I have tried to create a new paradigm for this. How can we still create really fun, energetic meetings? How can we create really fun, energetic teams? How can we be inclusive in our teams and our organizations? How can we create great leadership opportunities with new members and make them feel welcome? How can we make sure we create and make our old members also feel like they are still important and included as part of meetings? And how can we do that through this new world that we call Zoom? And so why do we do icebreakers? Icebreakers and team building activities in general, whether you call them team building activities, whether you call them name games, whether you call them icebreakers, whether you call them low ropes activities, should do a few things. One, you should really introduce your members to each other. When you have a new club or organization or an existing club or organization, your old members and your new members should all know each other. It should be a way to keep everyone in the loop. New members sometimes can feel anxiety attending these sessions. They don't know anybody. I want students to think about the first time you joined a new club or organization yourself. It might be your first time on campus. Many times you may go with your roommate or a friend you've met from class because you might not be comfortable in that space. And so keeping these opportunities to reduce some of the social barriers that may exist are really important. I'm going to try to minimize that on my screen. There we go. It also helps transition. So if you have a particularly long meeting, if you have something like maybe a student senate meeting that might be particularly long, or you have a long agenda, if you have a lot of events, this might be a great way to break up some of the business in between. This is a great way to keep energy high. We're going to talk a lot about keeping creativity high. If you're looking for new ideas from members, this might be a great way to keep their creative minds thinking, to come up with new ideas. And so we'll talk about that. We want to create inclusive environments, break down social barriers. We don't want to have people feel out of the loop. Clubs should be safe spaces. And when I say social barriers, I'm talking about everything from race, class, power, gender, sexuality. I'm also talking about physical ability. When we talk about some of our in-person icebreakers, I also used to talk about making sure we were including our friends who may have not been able-bodied or may have had vision or hearing impairments. There are roles and opportunities for everybody in these activities to somehow have engagement in some way. Maybe they're the judge, maybe they're the rule keeper, maybe they're the timekeeper, maybe they're some type of moderator. There are rules and roles for everybody in these types of opportunities. And the other thing I want to talk about is when I was doing these programs and putting this workshop together, the inclusion of access to internet, access to Wi-Fi, and access to video. Right now, some of you are joining me from your phone and may not have your video turned on. Some of you are choosing not to have me on your video or have you displayed on your video for whatever reason, and that's okay. I know some people may have a messy room or you just don't want to have your face on screen, and that's okay. But you want to make sure that you're still included in the meeting or participating in the meeting and having your members participate in the meeting. So when I talk about inclusion, I'm also talking about things like access to the meeting itself and not just say physical or social barriers as well. So I just talked about this a little bit, accessibility. We want to make sure we're including different folks, the different rules. We want activities to be lighthearted and fun. Icebreakers and team building activities are designed to be fun. Things should be entertaining. They should be lighthearted. There are no wrong answers. There is no judgment. These should be things that bring energy to your team meetings. They should bring energy to your group plans. They're great for in-person meetings. They're great for the start of an activity. If you're part of a club sport or some type of kind of more competitive engagement, this is a great way to start a practice, maybe end a practice. If you're part of a group that is a professional organization, you can tie it back to things like teaching networking skills or mentoring opportunities. You can bring in other people. There are a lot of transferable skills here to larger components. And all of our icebreaking and team building activities will have larger transferable skills to bigger lessons and values. So it's going to be very important to remember to have a short reflection session or some type of central message or lesson at the end of all of these to make sure you're talking about larger lessons in your program. So a lot of times in icebreakers, it's just meeting and introductions. That's a big lesson. You should know everyone's name in your organization. Names and faces are important. You should also talk about things like communication, making sure voices are heard, making sure you're listening to people. Many times in student clubs and organizations and also in professional offices, people may disagree, may not be on the same page. You may have a confrontation or a conflict with a club and team member or with a professional staff member. And so those types of communication concerns or collaboration concerns or leadership concerns or problems exist on all levels. And so these types of fun activities and games can help either break bad things down or build good things up. So these types of games and activities are very transferable on a much larger scope, on bigger picture topics, in addition to also being a lot of fun. All right, so I've broken these down into a few simple games, a few more complicated games or more complex games. And then also towards the end of the lecture or the end of our session, we're gonna talk a little bit more about some of the features that you can use on Zoom and using Zoom for these games as well. So, and full disclosure, some of these are activities and games that I've developed and used in the past. The other thing is it's not against the rules to not reinvent the wheel. You can go to YouTube and Google and search for icebreaker games on Zoom. A couple of these I did actually go online and do a Google search for and find, and I thought a couple of them were great. And you can tweak them to really make them useful to your team. So feel free to take any of these ideas and work them through with your other leaders and make them adaptable to what you want to do in your team. You can always make games more integrated and more complicated the more you are in an immersive team or the more complex your team organization is. I'm thinking maybe the Greeks, who have a very deep system and have deep connections and ties, might be able to make some of the games a lot more developed and a lot more complicated, things like scavenger hunts, pictures in advance, things of that nature. Clubs that are a little more casual, don't meet as often, you might be able to play some of the games at the more beginner level as you build up into your organizations. So charades is the simple game of acting out a person, place, or thing. What you're going to do is on Zoom is you're going to pick an actor from your screen, and from your actor, you're going to either private message them by chat, or you can text them, however, what form of technology you want to use. And then the facilitator themselves in Zoom can mute them so that they can't talk. And then what you can do is you can have them act out the book, film, TV show thing, whatever their prompt is. And then you can have folks in their chat or by voice, depending on how much chatter you want through your Zoom room to have, and guess out through the breakout, guess out through the charade itself. The great part about Zoom is that there is the ability to have what we call breakout rooms. So if you wanted to have smaller breakout sessions, if you have a particularly large group, I'm thinking of some of our bigger clubs like a Circle K that can have, you know, over 100 members, you can break out into 5 or 10 or 20 smaller breakout rooms and do these in smaller pockets, maybe in subcommittees, things of that nature, or by project, and then have them do the charades and come back. That's a good way to kind of break them down and have them come back, maybe see who can get it, who didn't get it, things of that nature. So charades is a fun one. Again, lighthearted fun, very quick. Charades can be something that can take 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting, brings a lot of fun energy, gets a lot of laughs, always a good time.
Really quick, Di, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I know that for many of you, I know all of you have been a part of attending Zoom meetings, but maybe not on the host end of things. And so when you go to create your meeting, if you already know who is going to be attending, you can set it up so that you pre-assign your breakout room. So if you know that, like, maybe you want to break it out by committee, maybe if you are student senate, maybe the finance committee is going to meet as a group to do an icebreaker, and the student affairs committee is going to meet as a separate group to do an icebreaker. You can pre-assign who is going to be in those different rooms, but you can also do that on the spot. And so when you're creating your, when you're in your meeting, you can play around on the bottom bar when you are the host. You can select breakout meetings and pre-assign based on who your attendees are, who would go into which room. So don't be afraid to play around, especially these first few weeks when you're just getting your feet wet with Zoom. Don't be afraid to just kind of test things out and explore all of the different options that you have.
Lauren, yeah, thank you, Lauren. We're going to go into that, actually specifically how to do a breakout room towards the end of our session. So if you're curious to know and don't know how to do a breakout room, if you stick with us on today's session, I will show you how to make breakout rooms at the end. So we'll get there. An old favorite, everybody I think has played this once. If you don't know what it's called 3 Truths and a Lie, or 2 Truths and a Lie, however many lies you want to put in there, or truths. You get people into groups. Again, this is good with breakout sessions, or it can be done in a large session. You can either select an individual, or you can have them where everyone chooses. You can have folks decide whether they're going to do 3 truths and a lie, or 3 lies and a truth, and you have to pick which one. In this case, 3 truths and a lie, which one is the lie? If the group is larger, again, you want to be able to use those breakout rooms and moderators. These are, again, really interesting. These are really, these can be very telling. These are great ways to find out new and interesting things about people. They can be very surface level. They can be like, I have cats. You know, I like the color purple. You know, whatever. They can be very there, or they can be very in depth. Like, you know, I'm afraid of, you know, failing my next exam, and be a little more personal. If you've ever played with me, I like to do a couple fun ones there, and I have a pretty good poker face when it comes to 3 truths and a lie, and so I'm usually pretty good at that. And so it's always interesting to read people in that way, and you can tell a lot from nonverbal communication in a game like this as well. So 3 truths and a lie can always be a lot of fun. There's also a feature in Zoom called Polls, which is like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. It's a survey feature. And so if you wanted to, you could elect one person to be the 3 truths and a lie face, if you will, and then you can have the group at the bottom of your Zoom. I didn't set this up in advance, I should have, but you can have the person at the you can have the group vote on which one they think it is. You can also use things like Kahoot and other types of things of that nature to do that. So if you wanted the whole group to vote on which one they thought was the lie, you could also have that type of group interaction. And we'll talk a little bit more about the polls feature in Zoom a little bit later as well. So 3 truths and a lie, again, can be very lighthearted. It can be very fun. You can do it on a very small scale, be very simple. You can do it on a very large scale and use a lot of the features in Zoom. It's really up to you and your group and how in-depth your group is. Remember, all of these trainings are, all these workshops and settings are customizable. So when you think about your particular group, think about the cohesive nature of your group. What type of group dynamic do you have? Is your team very, very small and very, very tight knit? Is your team very, very large and a lot more casual? And think about how you would implement this. How would your group receive these programs? Another quick and simple one is Boggle. If you've ever played Boggle, it's a word game. It's like a spelling game. And what you can do is when I'm not sharing my screen, if we were up here, you have the ability on your Zoom to have a grid. And what you can do is, you guys can't see me on my camera. Can they, Lauren? They can't see. They just see my screen, right? Okay. But what you can do is if you couldn't see my screen.
They see you, but you're far away.
Okay, fair enough. You can have people hold up a piece of paper and write a letter on a piece of paper, and then everybody can hold up that letter in a grids of 3x3s, 4x4s, or 5x5s. And you can give everyone a few minutes to try to spell as many words from those 9, 16, or 20 letters as possible. And then you can see who can maybe make either the best word, most complicated word, longest word, whatever. That can be an interesting, fun one. Boggle is really good for people who are good with word association, word game spelling. That's really fun. My nickname is Spell Check because spell check sounds like spell check, but ironically, I can't spell. So I'm never really good at Boggle because I can't spell things correctly. But that one, again, can be quick and fun. That can only, you can set a time limit on that. The only issue with a game like this is you need to make sure that you have participants in your group who are willing to have camera access. And also that if you had a group that was larger than about 25 people, you might have too many screens of people in your grid. So if you have an organization that's more than 25 people, you might have too many folks and you might not be able to see all the letters, or they might be in a different order. So the way Zoom works, there might be some tech issues there, but that's good for a nice small group. That's a good quick game and can move pretty quickly. The next one is called Box of Lies. If you've seen the TV show Late Night with Jimmy Fallon or the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, he does this a lot. Box of Lies is another game of either deception or truth, depending on how deceitful or honest you want to be. And so you're going to find or select a person to find either a box or some type of hidden container, and they're going to go around either their apartment or their dorm room or their house or whatever, and they're going to find a random object, and they're going to put the random object in the box or the bag. And what they have to do is they have to describe in grave detail, either by telling complete truths or completely making it up, what is in that box. And so the more descript and the more random the description is, and you can get people to guess on this, you can get people to either tell whether they are telling the truth or that they are lying about the object. This kind of goes back to 3 truths and a lie a little bit. And again, you can have participants use their thumbs up, thumbs down feature in Zoom, or their smiley face feature in Zoom. You can have people use the polls. You can have people use the chat true false feature. But again, this is a great way to have people kind of engage, be curious, gets people thinking. You can see who is a good truth teller or liar. You can see what type of objects people have in their dorms or in their apartment rooms. And so this can be a really fun game to get people to run around and do types of things. Again, this is something that you can have people set up in advance. So if you know going into a team meeting you have a week from now, you're going to assign Sally to be the person to find an object and set that up. You can have them do that in advance, so you're not scrambling the last minute to set that up, and have something engaging. The best way to do many of these icebreakers is to have a plan at least a day or two in advance to work out the kinks. You want to maybe have some of your team leaders in on the game as well, so that they can help you lead these games. And that way your team is going through them, and that it's a led activity. These should not be last minute things that you tack on to a meeting. They should be integrated into what you're doing. So feel free to think about planning something like Box of Lies or Boggle in advance, so that way you have a sense of how the layout will work, so you'll have easier implementation of that. All right, so Lauren, if you could pause the recording for me for a second.
All right, we're back to being recorded.
All right, so this mouse is moving very slowly, sharing the screen. All right, back to here. All right, good game, guys. again, the Boggle would have worked if everybody had the access to the camera as well. So either game would have been easy and fun, but that was pretty quick. That only took a few minutes, and I actually hadn't prepared anything for Box of Lies. So even unprepared, we were able to do that game, I think, in about 5 minutes. Name games, moving on to slightly more complicated, slightly more in-depth games. Name games are actually their own category of icebreakers. So name game, there are 1,000 different name games you can play. You can do name games based on the members of your group. You can do name games based on things like celebrities, dogs, food, other types of items. But the long and the short of it is getting people to start to associate fun, creative word associations. These are great ways to get people thinking creatively. They're great ways to get people to remember group names. Again, like I said, if you're in a club or organization or on a team or some type of group, you should know everyone's name and everyone's face in your club. There's no excuse by probably the third or fourth meeting, if you don't know everybody in that organization, as a leader of that organization, you need to do more. You need to push and make sure that you're welcoming people by their name when they come to meetings. If you do not know people and are greeting people when they come in, they will not come back to your club or organization. They will not feel welcome, and you will lose retention over time. So you'll also need to get your senior leadership and your established members to do the same thing. That is a cultural thing across the board, and I think it's one of the most important things for long-term recruitment and long-term sustainability of any club or organization, is to have that type of inclusiveness. And so here are a couple different examples of name games. One is the celebrity name game. You can also do things like I went on a picnic type stuff. But the celebrity name game is the ability to take a celebrity name, and you take the last letter of their last name, and then you have to pick a celebrity whose first name starts with the next letter. So if you take Zac Efron, you then take Neil Patrick Harris. From S, you could take Shakira. From A, you can then maybe take, I don't know, Alicia Keys. From, you get another S from there. You can take whoever you want. So you can go back and forth. This is a great way to get brainstorming moving. You can start to see who people pick as celebrities. You can see if they choose from music, from film, if they start picking famous scientists. You can pick in your field of study. If you are in the sciences and you only want to pick famous, science scientists. If you're in the field of the humanities and you only want to pick famous humanitarians, you can go that direction. So you can put some parameters on it if you want. You can leave it wide open. It's a fun way to go. If you wanted to make it really creative, we are getting close to Halloween. If you did a round where you went through and everybody picked a name, you can then go give them 10 minutes to dress up as that person. So if I picked, Shakira, and I had to then go dress up as Shakira, I would never make that happen. But you can then, give them a little bit of fun and have them go do that. There are ways to add bonus rounds or add more complicated pieces to that. That's a great way just to get people moving and thinking and shaking and thinking. The other one is, again, associating people with favorite items. I like food and animals. Those are my favorite too, because I like food and animals as food, but I like to stick to them as separate. And so alliteration is fun. So for this example, I actually used Lauren and I. So I said Diana loves dogs and Lauren loves llamas. I could also be like Diana likes donuts and Lauren likes lettuce. But these are really great, quick, the brain likes alliteration. And so these are really great ways to connect people to their names and their faces. And this is really a great way to, again, connect new members and old members and remember people's names. So name games are a lot of fun. If you were in person, you could also do name lines. So line everybody up whose first name is A to Z. You can line everybody up whose last name starts with that letter A to Z. You can line people up by their birthday, January to December, et cetera, et cetera. So name games can also work very easily in person. If you do end up getting back to meet in person, these are really quick games and fun. These are also the games like I'm going on a picnic, Ashley's bringing apples type games as well, to get people to memorize stuff. If you can get people to go around in a larger circle and get them to call out names again, that, again, great ways, repetition to learn people name games. Ta-da. Intermediate icebreakers. Again, as we're going, the games are getting a little bit more complex as we go. Scavenger hunts can take a little bit of time to set up. You can have speed scavenger hunts if you want. You can have in-depth scavenger hunts if you want. It's really up to you about how much time you want to set up into the scavenger hunt, how much time you want your members to have, and how much time you want to dedicate to it. They can be very simple. The simplest one I can think of is having a 5-off, where especially if people are doing their Zooms from their residence halls or from their apartments or from home, you can give them simple home items. I wrote on here 3 rolls of toilet paper, 4 packs of ramen, some shower sandals, a textbook from their first year, a DVD if people still have those, and maybe an Osprey Hub pen. And you can literally put the meeting on hold, give people 5 minutes. They can run through their apartment or their residence hall room, find those 5 things and come back. It's kind of like Let's Make a Deal if you've ever seen that game show. If you want, you can do multiple rounds or you can do collections. You can tell people, whoever can gather a soap, shampoo, loofah, poof, body wash, toothbrush, toothpaste, floss, and Q-tips. Whoever can get the most bathroom items together wins. If you wanted to have a conversation about positive sexual health items, you can ask them for, different sexual health items. If you wanted to do something that was based on your organization, you can go have them find different elements of their letters or their or parts of their fraternity that they collect in their room, photos. You can really go 1,000 ways with the scavenger hunt. Again, the more complex the scavenger hunt, the more lead time you're going to want in the beginning of the meeting. And you can do multiple rounds. So if you want to start off with who can find the most mechanical pencils in their residence hall room, then they can go do that. And then you can maybe be like, who can find the most pennies in their apartment? Who can find the most, who has the most varieties of ramen noodles in their apartment? And there may not be a quote unquote reward for these. There may be more of a winner of pride, but these are fun ways to get people up and moving around. This might be a good way to give also a 5 or 10 minute bathroom break if you're in a particularly long meeting. People may not want to participate in the scavenger hunt, but they may need to take a biology break and go use the restroom. So that's also a good way to break up the meeting. Zoom fatigue is very real. No more. Here in continuing studies, we lead a lot of workshops, a lot of programs for professionals in the professional world, and we don't have workshops that are longer than 2 hours at a time because we all know the Zoom fatigue is real. So breaks are always a good thing too. Again, if you have time and want to set up and you don't want to use the polls feature in Zoom, things like Kahoot. If you've never seen Kahoot, Kahoot is an online question and answer game show. And so you can visit Kahoot.com. You can set up sets of questions and answers like Jeopardy, and people can use their cell phones as their keypad, as their buzzers. And so if people aren't using cell phones to zoom in, if people are using their computers instead of their phones, they can use that. If you're having a lot of your members use their phone to zoom in, that might not be a great game because they might not be able to bounce back and forth between the apps. But again, if you don't have the ability to use Kahoot, again, the polls feature, we'll talk about this in a second, is a really great feature. If you want to have kind of a Jeopardy style quiz section, it's great if you can set up questions and answers in advance. You can make the questions about your organization, you can make the questions about members, you can make the questions about if you have some type of quiz bowl coming up. Questions and answers are a great way to get people engaged, and people love to be competitive. I think people in general are competitive. And so especially people in groups like to be competitive. So you can even make a winner of the week or a winner of the meeting. And something as simple as that is just a winner of pride. People love that. And so again, fun ways to keep people engaged in meetings and set up for Kahoot or something like that is required. But remember, you want to be inclusive in these types of games. So when you're talking about scavenger hunts and Kahoots, think about what your group might be interested in, but also remember to keep things inclusive. You don't want to start talking about too many personal details. You don't want to ask people for too many personal items or too many too many questions that might be too deeply probing into any individual person. You want to keep things broad and light and entertaining. Things that are for the advanced. So we're talking next level, pre-existing groups, groups that have been together a very long time, maybe have very tight bonds. Again, I'm looking towards folks like the Greeks, people like club sports, folks that have a nice tight network, may not have a whole lot of turnover year to year. These are things, or people that you can rely on, that you can get information in advance from, that you can rely on. These are the types of games that we can talk about. And if your group isn't there, maybe it can get there. Or again, most of these games have modifications, so don't be afraid to take a game or an icebreaker and make modifications based on your team's dynamic. All right. So Cutie Pie is using people's baby pictures. If people are willing to give up their baby pictures, and in today's day and age, it's really easy to just text people a baby photo. And the facilitator, just like I'm screen sharing, can screen share a baby picture. And what you can do is, through the chat feature, is you can guess whose baby picture that is. Now, it's important to make sure that whoever's baby picture gets put up that day, that they don't spill the beans and like, oh, that's me. And so we want to make sure that you either maybe mute everybody and use the chat feature, or maybe you text that person in advance and be like, oh, hey, Jeff, we're going to use your baby picture today. Don't spill beans. Like, don't give yourself up. Maybe play into it a little bit and be like, oh, I really think that's Lauren, you know, and play into it a little bit, and make sure that that they're not giving up the game. And I think that's a fun way to start conversations and to get people guessing. I think baby pictures are typically cute. I'm not a fan of having children of my own, but I think baby pictures in general of generic babies are always a good idea. I think puppies are cute too. But I think if you can get those types of things, that's a fun way to get people chatting about each other, and guessing. Again, it starts a creativity part of your brain. You have to start to think, who does that look like? Who might be in that group? And it makes you think deeply and creatively about the other members of your group. It also makes people forcibly, you really have to have a deep understanding of who is in your team to even have a remote guess of who that might be. So again, having a deep connection or a group that has a pre-existing group dynamic, that is required to play something like that at a high level. The other game, Once Upon a Time, is a game for, again, building creativity and building building upon each other and relying on the trust of the group to get you through the particular game. So Once Upon a Time is about building a story. And what you're going to do is you're going to have one person, usually towards either, if you're going to have a brainstorming session, this is good to do before a brainstorming session. This is also good to do towards the end of a meeting, as maybe setting up a reflection session. But what you're going to want to do is have one person in the group kind of finish their thought, or finish whatever they're going to say in the meeting. And the goal is to, when they're finished, is to have that be a prompt or a setup for the next person to start. And you're going to start a story from everyone's last statement. So the prompt can be something of, if you want to be very kind of fantasy tale and be like, once upon a time there was a dragon, and you can have that story go, and everybody has to contribute at least one sentence to that story. And depending on how many members are in your group, right now I think we have about 10 people in this group, we could have a 10-sentence story that starts in some type of way and ends somewhere else. And that could be a really fun way to get people thinking and have a creative story. It usually gets pretty funny. It usually gets pretty creative. It forces people to think outside the box. And it requires the entire team to have a voice while building this larger collective story. There are a couple goals in Once Upon a Time. One, you want to make sure you set up some ground rules. So you want to make sure there's no hateful language, there's no disrespectful stuff going on. You typically don't want to use real people, or you want to stay away from real scenario. You definitely don't want repeats of sentences. You need people to actually add a full sentence. You can't just be like, and then, they have to add a full sentence to something. And you also need to make sure that the last person, whoever person in this group number 10 is, they have to wrap it up. In a group of 10, person number 10 has to be the final sentence that concludes with the end. So if person number 1 starts with once upon a time there was a dragon who breathed fire, person number 10 has to end with the end. And so it's very interesting to see how the path of a story will follow through all of those 10 people. Again, great for creativity, great for big energy, and can really build upon itself. You can keep these in a particular theme, so depending on where the prompt starts, but it's also very interesting to see where you start and where you finish. Great for keeping voices in line. It's great if you have a meeting where certain number of people are really dominating the conversation and you want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to have a voice if there's not really a good space for them to interject it in another way. So this is a great way to kind of maybe mute the loud voices and unmute the quiet voices. And then the last word. The last word is, again, this is more of a complex game in the fact that it's a reflection exercise and it's a little more cerebral than some of the other things that we've played before. The last word is you would take a word or phrase from the last thing this person said, kind of like the once upon a time, and you're going to use that to give a statement about your own situation. So this, again, can be something lighthearted. It can be something particularly serious, but you want to get people to start to think about what is going on next in their own statement and allowing people to have their own voice. You can use this as closing reflections to activities that we've done. So this can be a closing activity to say like the box of lies. This can be used as a closing to a particular meeting. This can be used to gauge your club's attitude. If you feel you're having a morale issue, if you feel you're having a conflict or a confrontation issue in your club or activity, if you feel you're having a program or event that's coming up and there's maybe some problems that need to be solved, this is a good way to do that. If you feel that things are going well in your club or organization, that's a great thing to celebrate. Have a good reflection about that. If we're coming up to midterms and we want to have a conversation about how we're all a little overburdened and stressed, and how we also still have our club responsibilities and jobs and you know, all these other things going on. COVID is very overwhelming, and maybe we knock on wood, Stockton might have to go online again. You know, all these things might come together. So last words are great reflection opportunities for people to kind of express these things in safe environments. And again, including all voices and active listening to other people, and using what the previous person has said to build your own reflection can also be helpful too. Again, can be something as mundane from I have an exam this week to something as current events or topical as politics and everything in between. So we're going to play one more game. And this time we're either going to do the once upon a time story or the last word. So Lauren, if you could stop the recording again. This one's at 11, so we're going to move kind of quick, and we might just end on the reflections here, Lauren, if you want me to end at 11.
Sure. Yeah, because we do have another session that starts at 11. And actually, while you're all here, I'm going to put the link in the chat to mark your attendance, so that your attendance at this session appears on your Osprey Advantage.
Also, Lauren, if you could share my my slideshow with everybody who attended, that way they can have, there are more slides in here about how to use some of the other Zoom features, and we're just not going to be able to get to them. And so I want to make sure that people have that. But again, YouTube is your best friend when it comes to how to use some of these Zoom features, or also the Stockton website, I'm sure, also has some really good stuff on how to use Zoom. But using the breakout features and the polls, I think is awesome. And I encourage everyone to take a look at those. Students will now have the opportunity to use those features, so please look into them. So here are a couple ways to use reflections. If you are doing activities, if you have an active component of your club or organization meeting, and you do not have a thinking reflection component, you're only doing half of the work. You need to make sure you're having a thinking reflection component to everything that you actively do. If you do, you have to think. If you think, you have to do. It's not only an educational model, but it's also required as a leader, as a person. If you're only doing and you're not thinking, you're really screwing it up. There's an old adage that if Abe Lincoln said, if you have 8 hours to chop down a cherry tree, you better spend 7 hours to sharpen your axe. There should be some time to think and to plan and to reflect about what you're doing. So it's very important to think about whenever you do an activity in a club or whenever you do an event, wherever you have some type of meeting, these are different ways to have that thinking component. I like to do what we call the plus minus delta. Plus is good, minus is bad, delta is change. What was good about this activity? What was bad about this activity? What can we change about this activity, right? And there are 1,000 ways to ask those questions. But if you ever need to lead a reflection session and you don't have any other questions to add, ask those 3 questions and get everybody to add their 2 cents and compile the data. It's the quickest and easiest and best reflection you can do. Ask people what their role was in the activity, right? How did they identify with that role? Did they like that role? Did they not like that role? Would they like to change that role? Again, plus minus delta. Did they have a larger connection in that activity to their larger organization? In that role, did they automatically take a leadership role? Are they the president also? No? Okay. Maybe they would like to take a leadership role. Maybe they naturally have leadership aspirations. Take note of that as a leader. Those are things you should take aware of. Can you connect this to what your organization does? If your organization is based in service, maybe you need people who have certain roles and goals. That's something to take advantage of. Is your organization deeply involved in philanthropic organization? Is it deeply involved in your professional aspirations? Take note of that and try to incorporate those types of lessons learned into your activities. Again, many of these activities are transferable skills. Goals, visions, projects, memberships, values, those types of things should be talked about in your reflections. Do people feel safe to share in their activities? Some people may not answer that question truthfully. If they're not, you need to ask yourself as a leader, what are you doing? Are you allowing people to have an active voice in your club or organization? Just because these people are not the leaders today does not mean they're not supposed to be the leaders next semester or next year or the year after. You need to make sure you're incorporating people equally into your club or organization. They are the future, right? Make sure that their voices are being heard. Make sure that they feel comfortable to share that with you. If people don't feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas with you as a leader, you need to check yourself as a leader, right? And where are some of the encouragement and or barriers to share in that group? And how does that make you as a leader feel? How did that make you as a participant feel, right? Now, if this was in person, I would have had a lot more interaction, and I feel as a reflection on myself of this workshop, I should have done that more. And so taking a note of my own reflection of this workshop, I probably should have engaged you guys more. I did a lot of the talking, and I did this very quickly. I wanted to make sure I gave you guys a lot of examples. And I think you guys as participants could have had more engagement in that and more feedback in that. I think we had a couple of opportunities, but there probably could have been more. And so thinking about that as I do this session next time, that's the type of thing I'm thinking of. I want you to think about these sessions from your perspective, leading them towards your members, right? So the administration of the workshops is just as important as the workshops themselves as you're taking over your clubs or organizations. And so for that, I'm going to stop talking. And if there are any questions, I'll field those in the chat feature with Lauren.
And Diana, just to interrupt really quickly, I asked Joe not to start the next session until 11:05. So if you did want to go through the last few slides while the recording is still going, this way we can still have that available on YouTube, and this way you won't get cut off completely. And for those of you who are on, feel free to hang out here for the next few minutes. But if you were planning on going to the self-care session, which is next, I did ask Joe to not start that until 11:05 so that I can give you a chance to finish this one up and get to the next one.
At the bottom of your, I'm just going to click through these pretty quickly. They're just at the bottom of your box, your screen, there are going to be opportunities for breakout rooms and how to select people into them. There's also going to be opportunities of how to make polls. In polls, you have to go actually into your Zoom through your Go portal and go into the meeting itself. And you have to add polls through the meeting in your Zoom and set that up in advance. So breakouts can be done in advance, but they can also be done while in your meeting. Polls have to be done in advance. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, you can always email me. You can always call me, or you can visit me if you're over in Stockton, Atlantic City. I'm in Rothenburg. I also teach here on campus. I teach 2 classes of sports and film and sports media and gender. I'm a sports sociologist by education. And so you can find me Monday through Friday in Rothenburg, 8:30 to 4:30, and Monday nights I stay here on campus till 8:30 to teach. So I'm available, and although I don't work directly with undergraduate students anymore, my background is in student development and in athletics and recreation, and I've worked with undergrads for a very long time, and I would always Always encourage students to come out and seek me to talk about sports studies and student questions in general. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there and listening to me on a Friday morning. And I hope you're able to take these skills into your clubs and organizations and make them work for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Di. Does anybody have any questions or ideas that they kind of wanted to shout out and share? All right. Well, hopefully you were all able to get some new ideas for how to facilitate icebreakers and team builders and kind of tweak these different activities to make them work for your organization. Thank you so much, Di, for helping to present this wonderful topic today. I know it can be a challenge for a lot of people to think about how to do this kind of stuff through Zoom. And I think that you presented a lot of great ideas that we can all take back to our own groups and organizations to implement. So thank you so much. As a reminder to everybody else, we are going to get started with the self-care in COVID times in just a few minutes. If you can go and hop on over there, it's being presented by one of our recent Stockton alumni, Patrick Evans, who is from Sigma Beta Rho and involved with some other things on campus. So definitely hop over there and I'll see you in a minute.
Thank you.